I'm going to go do kind of a formal start here. One of the objective, I'm going to put my camera on too. And one of the objectives of this training is to learn from it on how we can improve the training. This is the first one on the updated guidance document. We had provided a similar overview training over a year ago, and it helped us inform both how the training can be best conducted, and also gave some good insights on the guidance document where some improvements may be needed there. This is it's a living document in that we're going to continue to learn from this guidance document in its application, and we hope it will serve its purpose to help guide incorporation of risk-informed performance-based attributes as standards are developed and maintained. But we recognize that this is something that we spent many years on to get it to where it is, but it's something that's going to continue to learn and improve on. So with that, I wanted to thank everybody who's attending this. I figured we got 14 participants right now, and as what I'm going to do is I think we have a manageable amount of people to maybe just say a couple of words. This is meant to be a discussion as well as a training. And what I'm first going to do is turn it over to Prasad. He's the chair of the Risk Informed Performance-Based Consensus Committee, and have him say a couple words, and then maybe just everybody just say what their name is and what organization, or rather not so much organization, but what standard committee they may be on. So I'll turn it over to Prasad first.
Okay, thank you, Jim. Welcome, everybody. This is, for me, and I believe for our committee, RP3C, this is a very important event. It's the start of what I think of as the next phase in the development of RP3C into something that can more effectively support ANS standards and their modernization. Yesterday, I don't know how many of you were on the standards forum, but what became clear is that the work that we are trying to accomplish in RP3C is very important. In fact, it's very important to a lot of people who don't even know about RP3C or even ANS standards. And, they are doing stuff that is well defined within the framework that we are trying to communicate in this training. And, I hope all of you will be able to make the connections with other activities that you do, including working on individual standards. So anyway, Jim, thank you very much for taking the lead on this. And, you've been moving things along. I haven't really helped you in any way. You should probably be glad that I didn't, offer to help. Although I did offer to help, but that's okay. I think you'll do fine. And, I thank Bob Youngblood also for working with you. Ed Wallace, I think, has said that he will join at some point, but he has also been, the past couple of years, quite important in the contribution to where we are in the training activity. So, Jim, go right ahead.
Okay, and again, I'm just going to go down the list here, and as Prasad said, Bob Youngblood is co, I don't know if it's co or assistant chair, whatever it's called. So Bob, maybe just a couple words from you, and then we'll go down the list.
Okay, well, hi, and you, I think you nailed my understanding of the intent with respect to this should be a conversation. I'm Bob Youngblood. I got into this general area shortly after 3 Mile Island, and began working with Prasad 25 years ago almost, and here we are.
Yeah,
So
it's a good way to put it. Here we are. Okay, and of course we have help from Pat Schrader and Kathy Murdoch from ANS, and as always, and I've already had a couple conversations with Pat this morning, really appreciate their help. And then we'll go down to the list, and just on the order that's on my computer, it's with Francis. Just maybe a word
Sorry.
about the organization. Go ahead.
Good morning. I had to find the mute. My name is Frankie Pimentel. I'm the NEI liaison to the ANS Standards Board. So,
Thank you, Frankie. Han? And you can see I'm not saying the last names because sometimes I'll mess up the first names bad enough. So, but Han, if you are there and wanted to just say what organization you're from, then I'll come back to you. There's an iPhone.
Yeah, hi, this is Paul Cantonwine. I'm at Oak Ridge National Lab, and this is just a topic that I'm interested in to follow. I think it's going to be really important for the future of nuclear power. So.
Thanks for updating your name. Okay, Jim August.
Hey, Jim August. I'm semi-retired. I'm trying to glean everything I can about approaches. I think this is all very developmental, so I'm very interested in hearing what people have to say.
Good, thank you. Mark Joseph.
Yeah, this is Mark Joseph. I'm currently chairing development of ANS 2.36 on aircraft hazard analysis. And so like all the ANS standards, we're intending to incorporate the RIPB approach and see how that applies to our standard. So
Thank you.
I used to work with Jim, but don't hold that against me.
Well, I don't know which Jim you used to work with, Jim August or Jim O'Brien.
Yeah, this is Jim August. Mark and I were both at Fort St. Vrain for, I don't know, a decade or so.
Okay, good. Well, thank you. Mark Lynn.
Yeah, this is Mark Lynn, retired from ORNL. I'm vice chair of the Large Light Water Reactor Consensus Committee, and I participate on the RIRCC and the RP3C as well. So, and I'm chairing a couple of standards.
Great. Ronnie, I know it's either Rainey or Ronnie, and I say it wrong every time.
Good morning, Jim. It's Ronnie. You had it right the first time.
Dang.
This is Ronnie Franovich. I'm a senior policy advisor for nuclear energy innovation at the Breakthrough Institute. I spent 30 years with the U.S. Nuclear Regulatory Commission before I joined the Breakthrough Institute earlier this year. And I've been very closely following the Part 53 development for new and advanced reactor licensing. And so I really look forward to hearing what you have to say, Jim, and what the rest of the attendees contribute. Thank you.
Thank you. Rob Berg.
Yeah, this is Rob Berg. I work for engineering, planning, and management. I'm the chair of the Auxiliary Systems Design Subcommittee in the Large Light Water Reactor group.
Thank you. And Robert, this is where I'm going to struggle. Kalantari.
Kalantari, that's me. Thank you. I'm also with EPM, as Rob is. So we work together. I'm the company president and CEO. I've been with the company for 38 years. I was also recently appointed to ANS Standard Board, a member in June. As far as risk-informed performance-based standards, I've been involved with NFPA committees developing NFPA 800 series, which is 801 through 806, and 805, which is widely used in the industry, is the performance-based standard for fire protection for light water reactors. So I've been involved with that since late 90s. It became standard 2001 and was adopted by the NRC in 2004. And almost half of the plants in the US have taken that route, addressing fire protection using the standard. At EPM here, we use a lot of performance-based techniques doing not only fire protection, but addressing some of the new issues at nuclear power plants, risk-informed regulations, 4A, 4B, 5B, and 5069, and all that, and PRA. So this is great, and looking forward to learn more with the rest. Thank you.
Thank you. And we got one more, but I just wanted to, before I lose the thought here, is, we have a bit of a more diverse group and some new people that I haven't talked to with before on this. And I think that's great because your perspectives are really going to help us move forward. The last one I have on my list, and then we'll go back and see if we missed anybody, is Stephanie Buster.
Hi, Jim. Stephanie Buster here. I am a new member here, and I'll just give a background. I'm also affiliated to NNPD, so the Nuclear and Non-Proliferation Policy Division within ANS. I'm currently working at Duke University in the Office of Audit, Risk, and Compliance. And I, for our purposes here, have recently joined the ANS 60.1 working group focusing on export controls.
That's interesting. That was a topic that I was interested a couple of years ago in. I knew there was some efforts going on there. Let's see if okay, I'll just open. Did I miss anybody?
Hello, this is Han Frank. Sorry, I was on mute. So Han Frank, NRC, in the divisions of advanced non-large water reactors. 35 years in reliability and PIA, co-chair of ANS 2.26, and members of the others. Thanks.
Great. Okay, then we're going to get started, and I'll ask Pat to move the presentation slides. And again, this is going to be a discussion as much of training. It is formulated as a training because I want to get your insights of whether it will serve that purpose down the road. But also it's I want to open it up for discussions. I do have a stop at 12 o'clock for myself, but Bob Youngblood and Prasad will continue the conversation as we go. So just the overall objective of this training was to provide knowledge to writers of ANS standards that will assist them in incorporating RIPB attributes in the ANS standards. And we're trying to do that by using this guidance document, and with Pat, as he does so good, put together this as a means that you could have a hyperlink and pull up that document. So it'll be ready, available. I think everybody's going to get a copy of these training slides too, Pat.
Everything is going to be posted on RP3C's website, on the ANS public website. And they can contact me directly as well if they would like anything sent directly.
Okay, and since you all got the invite, you have Pat's address, and of course you have my email address too. So we'll go forward from there. And please, anybody has any thoughts or any discussion, please let me do. This is just a kind of a highlight of what's in the guidance, and we're more interested when we get into it. But as a training, I like to always let people know what they are getting into and how close they are to the end. I know that I always appreciate knowing when the end is near. I hate to say that, but as Prasad knows, I'm more brief in my discussion than some. And my attention span on training sometimes is shorter too. But the guidance has this part. You guys will have the hyperlink to the guidance and can look through it. And we'll move forward into the more detailed sections. So next, please. Okay. And one of the things that I personally, and Prasad will probably laugh or be mad at me for saying this, but I have struggled with this concept of risk-informed performance-based. So I've learned a lot through the process of helping write this, in some ways being the lead writer, but taking a lot of the experts' inputs and trying to put it in a document. And what I really think is important is to understand, some basics of why we have standards. And Prasad was a big part of helping me with this. But basically, we write a standard to establish requirements. These are the shall statements that, taken together, would drive a user of the standard to accomplish one or more outcomes. It's kind of a broad statement that, it's meant to highlight that, you're providing requirements to meet some outcome. And in standards, we also include should statements. And should statements are very important to provide recommendations and additional guidance to the user. One of the keys for doing this, shall versus should, and I've done it over my career. I've been in policy, I've written rules, I've written a lot of different things that are of this nature, and it's very important for people to know what exactly they have to do, and these other shoulds that provide insights on really how they can meet the requirements. The user of a standard, we want that when you've done the standard, for instance, if it's for something with commercial nuclear power or for Department of Energy that I work for our nuclear facilities, that you executed the standard, you did it the way that you had all the shall statements, that you have achieved the outcome, whatever the outcome might be. But usually it's related to some kind of an action for licensing or of approval to operate. So these become a part of that very important part of how you might meet a regulation or a rule. All right, and one of the keys that we went back and forth is on relative to developing of this training was the term outcome, and also how important it is to clearly define the outcomes. And what I've learned from looking at both Department of Energy standards, ANS standards, other standards, it's not always clear. The outcome statement is not always really clear. And that's one of the things we want to promote with our standards development is the idea of a clear outcome. Because if you have a clear outcome, then you can, better use these risk-informed and performance-based attributes to achieve that outcome and to define which you actually need in the standard to achieve the outcome. And again, as a little note in the bottom says, the RIPB attributes or standard attributes are there to achieve the outcomes more efficiently, whether it's by defining the scope of the standard, defining some of the key things to look at from a risk-informed perspective, or providing a performance-based perspective where you define high-level items that have to be done and provide flexibility on how to do them. So we'll get into more of that as we move forward. But what I think I'd stop here at a second and ask if there's any thoughts or comments or questions on this slide.
I guess this is Mark Joseph. I'll offer one. So with some DOE standards, the should statements, as far as getting approval, it seems like, the should statements are definitely a large consideration. And, you have to have specific justification for not meeting a should statement. And I agree with what you're saying here, but the should statements become pretty important. I
Oh, yeah.
just wanted to throw that out there.
Yeah, and I've lived the DOE dream. I was actually the director of the Office of Nuclear Safety and developing some of these standards and listening to just the same thought that you had there, is that the should statements become almost like de facto requirements. And our standard answer to that was always, it's an acceptable approach. It describes an acceptable way, that there are other ways to do it. But if you do another way, there may be an expectation that you, I don't know if justify is the right word, but, defend the approach that you used. And it's not always the same for every should. Sometimes shoulds are very, very, optional, but other times shoulds do infer a higher level of expectation, but not a rigid shall. So what you said, Mark, is completely true. And I think we got to be careful as we develop our standards. When, again, what is a real shall and what is should mean in this context?
Yeah, I like your third bullet there. If you could implement that third bullet, that'd be good.
Yeah, hey, this is Jim August. I'm gonna just provide a comment. I worked on 53.1, for example, and we went to great pains to screen should statements and religiously report in tables at the end of each section the shall requirements. And my comment is should statements are problematic. We're writing standards. In many instances, it's very easy to get carried away with things that individuals think ought to be done, but in reality are not necessary at all for the standard. So from a perspective of not providing prescriptive standards, I think people need to really look at their should statements and cull them down, because a lot of them, frankly, I see as rhetorical, not necessarily easy to implement. And the standards, I think, benefit if you stick as much as possible to shalls.
Good point. One thing I've noticed, I think, and I might be wrong, we're focusing on ANS standards, but I forget if it's NFPA standards that are typically pretty crisp when it comes to shall statements, and maybe not using too many should statements. So I do think that depending on the topic area, that there may be some areas where shoulds are appropriate, but I do agree a crisp and concise list of requirements is really the most important part of it. And I think ANS did a good job. I believe ANS is this way, where they include the option of using appendices that provide perspectives on and technical background on the topic area, which aren't really shoulds, but just a discussion. And I like that approach. Anybody else have any other thoughts on this topic? These are good insights. Do see a chat. I'm not good at the chat. Let me see what's in the chat. Oh, I agree. Stephanie, good.
Yeah, that was just Stephanie saying I agree with the should versus shall statement.
Okay. We're going to move on. Objectives for risk-informed standards. You really, how does risk, we kind of broke it up, the risk-informed performance based. Sometimes it's not easy to break those up. Sometimes they're better talked together, but we did try to break them up and have the discussion. And there was a couple areas where the risk-informed can be highlighted as far as the standard. And again, one of them is related to kind of the scope of the standard. You know, what are you going to, when you're going to write a standard, you know, what are the important things that you are writing this for? And you know, the example provided in here, you know, you could be focused on the higher importance and safety significant components that you are focusing your standard on. Another way that, depending on the type of standards, you might even include a risk metric as a part of an outcome statement. I don't know if that's done often. I think that we don't necessarily go that way, but it certainly is an option. I think that some of the we call it the seismic standards kind of use that kind of an approach where you're defining acceptance based upon meeting certain criteria for events that are of a higher or more frequent nature. You change what type of acceptance criteria you have based upon what kind of frequency range you're talking about. So those are
Jim, if I can jump in there just for that point, ANS 2.26 is an example of that. And maybe Han Fan can speak to that. But, you know, I think it is something that one can keep in mind in terms of what is the outcome that you seek to achieve. So. Han, were you going to say something?
Hello, this is Han. Sorry, I was on mute again. So I'd like to share with you my perspective. After many years in risk-informed applications, the term risk insight never clearly defined, even to the staff, the NRC staff. For advanced non-AWRs, even that's the biggest issue, because there's no clear risk metric like LRF, LERF, a CDF, a consequence, or QHO, or commission goals, and so on. So what does that mean by risk insights? Secondly, okay, the insights that how much is enough and where anyone should stop or keep playing with the models or, you know, digging into the insights. That's the points right there. That you know, that it's still an open, okay, open statements even to the staff. That what are those insights? Risk achievements, risk reductions. What are those? And how we define that enough for the staff to make the decision of the conclusion.
Yeah, and I wasn't sure if that. I mean, I don't know if that was kind of just a statement or if that was a question, Han.
So regarding the second question, the outcome of the standard, would you repeat your statement again regarding the second bullet?
Yeah, I actually don't see this being applied much, and maybe that's consistent with what you're saying. But in Prasad said in ANS 2.26 relative to seismic criteria, there is some reliance on acceptable levels of I don't know if it's analysis or you know, like we call it levels of protection that are based upon the likelihood of the seismic event. You have different levels of ground motion that are expected to occur at different levels of frequency, and so the lower ones, of course, more frequent. Higher ground motions at less frequent, but you design to different levels of protection for those different kind of earthquakes. And there's actually you get to a point where you're not actually designing to a bigger earthquake. You stopped your frequency at whether it's 10,000 year return frequency or what the exact number is. So that would probably be an example.
Right, so that's the goals right there. What the hazard curve, if you don't have the site specific hazard curve and you use the bounding size, then what the curve, what the range, and I think that is still in the discussion. I don't have any insights at this point on that.
Yeah. Okay. And again, these are kind of broader areas of how risk can be potentially used in the standards. They're thoughts to kind of drive thinking, if you want to put it that way, as the standard developers get working on it. So let's go to the next slide, please. Pat.
Thank you. So may I say one more, please?
Sure.
The regarding seismic boundings that the concern to the staff when using the bounding site for seismic evaluation. But for DC or pre-construction for DC application, that's still the challenge to the applicants that how the boundings would be used. But anyways, I'm sorry. Thank you. Just my personal sharing.
I appreciate the inputs. That like I said, I'm going to be eventually ending my participation in this, but I hope these discussions continue. I still got a half hour, so let's go on. These are kind of just supposed to be thought-provoking. They're in the guidance document as ideas for how risk insights can be used to meet the standards outcome. One is, defining the level of rigor or effort used to meet the outcomes. Are you going to, require a really sophisticated analysis, or is it going to be an easy bounding analysis that can be performed, and so forth? And so you can use those as you're developing your standard to define, what is the shall or even the should on what it is driving you to do. And then it can also, as an example here, your surveillance requirements for structure, system, and components. You have a certain testing frequency or type of test, and you look at the risk, passive versus active components for existence. For example, you can help define what your surveillance may be on that. Let's go to the next slide. Okay, performance-based standards. And it really comes down to a lot of this is, to me, is kind of the how, the what versus the how. And I think Prasad has a better insights on this one itself, but it's to me, it's when you develop a standard, you again get the shall statements to say what you're going to do, and the how is left up to the person performing the actions called for in the standard. And performance-based standard provides that flexibility to achieve the outcome in a manner that is most efficient to the user, but provides enough shall statements that, again, as we said in the beginning, there's confidence that if you meet the shall statements, however you met them, that the outcome, this really we're dealing with mostly safety kind of outcomes, has been achieved.
Excuse me, this is Hunt. I have a question, please. So in the other standards, normally the house provides a note associated with the requirements. Is that acceptable?
You said the house provides the what again? I'm sorry.
In the note associated with the requirements, there are notes, okay, not the requirements itself, but the note, relative note to those requirements. And some standard providing the how in the note as one way to achieve the uh, requirements. So is that a normal ways or an acceptable ways by providing hows in the standard?
Well, I think the definition and the determination of what is a what and what is a how varies among folks. I can think a lot of it is the level of detail provided in meeting something. So maybe as an example of what is, you have to have a quality report or quality analysis, and the how may be defined or could be defined, or it could be left as a should relative to peer reviews or other things to achieve the what high quality document. But that might not be a great example. Others may have better examples.
Thank you.
All right, we're going to go on to the next one, please. This is kind of what I talked about. I kind of actually was more talking about this slide than the one before that, with the level of detail and the prescription. And this is where kind of risk informed and performance based can come together, because the level of prescription may be informed by what the risk of the activity being performed. But it's also the type of activity. Sometimes it's simple, like a decay heat calculation, and you're just following rigorous normal engineering protocols. But then again, you could get to the statement where there are different levels of sophistication of the analysis that you may do or not do, some simplifications that would be allowed because you are in a less risky area. So that's kind of what we see as the intersection between performance-based and risk-informed, where risk-informed can give you the insights into what a level of prescription may be. And I pause all these pauses are important if anybody has any thoughts or comments they want to provide. Not, we can always come back. So let's go on to the next one. So when we boil down to, as we were developing it, say, well, what are some of the key attributes that we want to identify as part of this guidance? And so we numbered them and put them in a table in the guidance document. We've talked about all of these already. These are the short versions of them. And what we did with this kind of a outline of R1, R2, R3, and so forth is we looked at a couple standards and say, okay, if we tried to measure this standard as it is right now against these attributes, how does it measure up? or, is R1 used, or R2, or is P1 used? So we'll get to that later in the training, but these was kind of the boiling down of the attributes for risk informed and performance based. So next slide, please. So I can't remember what Appendix A was, Prasad. I think it was background of the RIPB, risk informed performance based. I'm pretty sure it was.
I think Appendix A is just basically about RP3C and the process of, how RP3C works. So.
Yeah, I got it. I'm actually looking at it right now, so I'll be able to say. Oh, actually, I'm wrong. Appendix A is important. We used to have a section in the main body called roles and responsibilities. So you're right. You're right, Prasad. So Appendix A talks about roles and responsibilities in implementation of the RIPB, and it does say, what the ANS board is, i.e., theirs is to approve this guidance, and then Prasad is the RP3 chair. What his responsibilities for are. It was thought that it was best to put it in an appendix. So it's kind of straightforward, but it's actually good for people to look through that appendix and understand in their role what their responsibilities are. But then in Appendix B goes to more of the technical application of the standard, and as an example of risk-informed and performance-based, which is interesting. I still think some people would disagree that 5065 is a good example or not a good example. But I did want to kind of highlight what some of the attributes of that rule. Now, it's not a standard, so we're kind of a little bit out of the swim lane of talking about standards, but it is a requirements-based document, so it has some nexus to this. And you can see what the outcome of the 5065 is. You shall monitor the performance or condition of SSCs against licensee established goals in a manner sufficient to provide reasonable assurance that these structures, SSCs, are capable of fulfilling their intended functions. So we're looking at our guidance is, would this be a good, if this was a standard, would this be a good outcome statement? Would it be a risk-informed statement? Would it be a performance-based statement? So that's kind of what, it's not a bad idea to kind of examine this as an example and think about it. If we're developing our own standards, is this a good example for us or not? And these answers aren't necessarily right, yes or no. There are a lot of it, kind of. And I think that's what we find with risk-informed performance-based. It's always a matter of getting more risk-informed and more performance-based, rather than saying we've achieved a perfect risk-informed performance-based standard. That would be up to the eye of the beholder, for one. And secondly, I think that we could all better agree on whether it is meeting attributes of it that are important. So this one is an interesting one. It's very, in my opinion, risk-informed and performance-based. It has high-level outcome goals that are related to these goals that provide reasonable assurance, which is kind of a risk-informed performance-based statement. Okay, next slide, please. So the maintenance rule provides directions in it, shall statements. One is that the licensee shall assess and manage the increasing risks that may result from maintenance. And then again, it limits the scope to risk-informed values process that has shown to be significant to public health and safety. So again, looking at our guidance and thinking about this, is this risk-informed and performance-based? How does it measure up against the attributes that we had identified in that table? So when we do this training, I think we're going to have a second level training where we focus more on really delving into these questions, and you will ask the participants to really think about this and have more open discussion. But at this point, I think I'll stop and pause and see if anybody has any thoughts.
There are a couple of notes in the chat. I don't know if you want to take a look at that, Jim.
Sure. I like Jim's, like it or not, the maintenance rule is a classic example. Well, I mean, so I think it is, and it's been noted as such. I think it is a good example.
Yeah, you know, this is Jim here again. For anyone who's been around like most of us, that is to say back in the 1980s and post TMI and all the issues that arose over maintenance and how we did maintenance. The maintenance rule took about 10 years to develop and implement, but it did resolve those issues. It's so, you know, there you go.
So it's a success story.
Yeah, success criteria there, I'd say it worked out. People, including myself, when it was first proposed, and I contributed, were very disappointed in it, but it has stood the test of time. And actually, my disappointment is from 9301 and the fact that the materials that ultimately boil down to the maintenance rule were incredibly complexly written. And those had to be straightened out by lawyers, really. The rule as it stands right now is a classic. It's very clear. But that was not the result of a couple weeks worth by any stretch of the imagination, a couple weeks worth of time. So it's a good example and reference for anyone.
So the 9301 you talked about, and maybe I got it wrong, the number, were those implementing reg guides or something?
No, 9301 was Newmark, or Nuclear Utility Management Resources Committee, which now morphed into what's called NEI, or Nuclear Energy Institute. And the NRC basically was coming up with proposals on a system-by-system basis from about 1984, starting with emergency diesel generator availability and really what evolved into maintenance preventable function failures. And they were starting to go through each similar system and gradually implement more and more prescriptive requirements. And frankly, those became unmanageable at the utility level. They were virtually impossible to do. And that's what led to the explosion that led to Newmark, which was the utility group of basically managers, nuclear utility managers, that started to comment on NRC proposals. And over a period of about 5 years, all that stuff emerged and was consolidated into Newmark 9301, which is it's a developmental document, but that morphed into really that led to the maintenance rule. But 9301 as written is still a very complicated document. Its requirements boil down to the maintenance rule exactly. But if you go back and look at it, you've got to have a PRA to come up with the risk part. There are requirements that are almost beyond this world to implement the maintenance rule. So Prasad and others can also comment and give the NRC perspective, I'm sure.
Yeah,
there's no end to the comments you can get on this, Jim.
Well, yeah, no,
I'd say
we can
move
have, and I'm not going to be able to, stay around for all of them, so I'm going to move on. But I did have one comment on that. That doesn't surprise me. I mean, one one of the dangers with risk informed and performance based is that it can, people can try to well, the criticism is the confidence that you're going to achieve the outcome, and people are nervous about leaving flexibility or relying on risk numbers and so forth. And so that it doesn't surprise me. It's actually a good example, but perhaps it's also a good example of, even though there were those issues, that success was still achieved. So I'm going to move on, but thank you for those thoughts, Jim and Prasad. Like you said, it could go on forever. Let me see if there's another chat we need to go on here. Yeah, the sideline things. Hey, the Germans are worse, eh? So I think everybody can read the it's good. Sometimes the chats are just good discussion points, and I think like I said, I don't have time for all of them at this point, but I think that they are good insights, so I appreciate them. All right, so we're going to go on. Did you push up the next slide already, Pat?
I did.
Okay, I thought so. I thought it looked different. So these are the kind of questions you could ask as part of just educating your as part of the education process. That's what this RIPB guide is to get people smarter on what it means to be risk informed and performance based, and provide insights from a lot of people that have been involved in this industry for a while. And I like questions because they make you think. And so these are kind of the questions you might ask yourself when you're looking at your standard. Is the outcome of the standard I'm developing clear and defined? Are the criteria used to establish the outcome written at a high level? That's kind of performance based. Does it define how to develop risk insights, and does it define how to use risk insights? And that doesn't mean, again, for a given standard, depending on the topic, I think one should always be yes, and two should always be yes. But the risk insights one may be kind of somewhat, in my opinion. Again, I'm not the expert on this. I'm just a person with an opinion. I guess they could say. There's an old saying to that too. So let's go on to the next one. Okay, so this is where we get into an appendix that was added to provide some kind of more step back example on performance-based and risk-informed. And this one was actually provided, and Prasad, you can help me out with that, by the JCNRM group. I think this was either Dennis Heineke or Bob Budnitz.
It was Bob Young, Bob Budnitz, who asked the question, how would you do a performance-based approach to manufacturing an aluminum bar? And, so the appendix just goes into a lot of detail on, how you can go overboard in many different directions, even if the immediate objective is just to produce an aluminum bar, of a certain length. The point is, the bar itself may be meaningless, but the purpose for which the bar is going to be used, that may be what you have to pay attention to. And that's what brings out the distinction between, the product and the outcome. So this appendix is just a way of, understanding that distinction. So
Yeah.
I don't want to take over, Jim. Please go ahead.
No. I'm gonna go over to the remember where we are here, because I wanted to go over. I got 5 minutes before I said I really apologize that this happened, but it happened, and I got assigned this task at noon. So let's go on. And one more. Let's go to the next one. Just want to provide some high levels. So in the Appendix D, there's of examples. What I did is I took like 3 or 4 different ANS standards, and I kind of did what we did with the maintenance rule and so forth. It said, does it have a clear outcome? Is the outcome risk informed? Is it performance based? Does it have the attributes? So I did that exercise, and that's something when we get to the follow-on training, we're going to go into details on, and also idea was to ask for, if the group that targeted standard to pull apart in detail that a working group may be developing or somebody may be interested in. When I did Appendix D, I kind of looked at, what is the type of standards? There's design basis event definition type standards, design analysis standards, and process standards, and we took them apart. So with that, let me see. We did have an example of 2.26 that I will see if I can get Bob and/or Prasad to go through, because I'm going to run out of time, or I could just save it for the next level class for when, part 2 when we get in more detail. But I did want to go to the slide on, I think it's called takeaways, and then I'm going to turn it back over to Prasad and Bob. So if you can get there, very good, Pat. Thank you. I'm following along on my own version. So what we hope to get away from this, and again, I'm not going to apologize one last time and say, I hope you guys continue the discussion, because we want to get the main takeaways from your training is ANS promoted use of IEP, the approaches and standards. The guide is intended as a tool for consensus committee and working groups. And that, again, there's a group in the RP3C, which a lot of folks here are members are, that are there to assist in this. I think out of this, I want to continue to let you all have the discussions, because we will be open not just on how this training can be improved, but also on insights to the guidance itself. Bob actually had a lot of, Youngblood had a lot of things he said, well, we can improve the guidance. I said, well, we're on the finish line of 2 years of work now. We can't restart it. And Pat knows what we've been through. Well, we can continue to get good ideas. So I think that's one of the points here. With that, I apologize. I did one more apology. I've got to leave, and I'll let you continue to run the slides, Pat, and Prasad, I'll turn it over to you.
Hey, thank you, Jim. I think you covered what I think are the essential aspects of what the guidance is trying to accomplish. Let's say, let me ask, do people want to go through the examples, or do you feel like you got enough out of this abbreviated training session? I don't know if you can just do it with a show of hands or a thumbs up or something, in the reactions. I'd like to get some sense of where do people want to go, because Jim unfortunately had to cut short his participation.
Hey, Prasad, this is Jim August. I think for a future presentation, the examples would be great, or an example would be great to develop in detail. I know the example that Bob Budnitz put together is sort of basic in a lot of ways, and it's maybe artificial, but it does get the points across. I think if we could come up with another example or a few more examples that are relevant to actual work that we're doing in the workplace, that might really be a beneficial supplement to what we have here.
Okay, let's see. I saw someone else. I think Rani said, she'd appreciate going through the example. So, Pat, let's go to the start of Appendix D. And okay, the first one is 226, and Han Fan is the vice chair of this working group, and they are just now he says he has to log off also. Well, we'll continue, and we'll try to communicate the essential concepts in 2.26. The thing is, 2.26 was issued, like around 2005 or thereabouts. I don't know if Pat remembers, but it's been around a long time. And when it was issued, I got into the working group. And if you look at 2.26, there's an Appendix C. And, that appendix makes the standard our first, that is ANS's first risk-informed performance-based standard. So I thought it's important to have this as an example because, even though it's old, it incorporates concepts that just now are being appreciated, by a lot of people in the industry. So anyway, with regard to the standard itself, the outcome is basically what are the seismic design categories, and what are the criteria and guidelines for selecting limit states. Now, all this is saying is if there's an earthquake, the structures and systems may go through some kind of deformation, and some deformation may be okay and some may not. And how do you differentiate between these? And the standard tries to identify the categories, and that's where this idea of categorization comes in. And then, in terms of the response of individual components and structures, that's where the standard becomes the basis for a more prescriptive standards. That is the what is it, ASCE or something. So let's go on to the next slide. So, this is where the kind of analysis that Jim is suggesting we should go through when we are trying to write a standard becomes important. So, in terms of the outcome, it says that it's identification of the seismic design category and the limit states. Now, is that sufficiently clear? I think again that's that's sort of in the eye of the beholder. Whether that is sufficiently clear. But the important thing is that you're asking the question and making a judgment as the writer of the standard. So, in terms of what I've said so far, are there any questions or comments?
This is Mark Joseph. Yeah, this question, I don't want to spend a lot of time on it, but I am kind of curious, when you establish an overall, I guess, objective for the standard, or, like you've stated here, earthquake safety. So, the NRC looks at safety as far as the public. DOE we're working on a standard that is for DOE and NRC. And so DOE definitely looks at a co-located worker, which is, significantly different than the concentration of, NRC. So I guess I'm wondering, based on people's experience with ANS standards, and, they're performance based, like earthquake safety, is it expected that we would concentrate on public safety and not necessarily go down the line of, co-located worker? Like I said, DOE, they calculate very specifically the exposure to a person 100 meters away from the facility. And then there's a specific category of SSC that applies to that. And they build it into their requirements. I was just wondering if the experience or, the application of worker safety in addition to public safety is a part of ANS standards.
Say, Mark,
ANS is not in the business of dictating what a standard should accomplish. It's up to the working group to determine, what would you like to accomplish, and that goes to this question of how do you define your outcome. What you're saying, Mark, is that the way DOE defines outcomes is different from the way NRC defines outcomes. And that's a sort of that may be the nature of the task at hand, whatever the standard is that you're trying to write.
Yeah, Prasad, if I can just interject, this is Jim August again. Mark, we run into this problem everywhere all the time. Right now, we're working on ANS, I think it's 30.2, which is SSC. I don't even know if it's categorization or classification, but same issues up there. That is to say, do we restrict it to nuclear safety, public health and safety, SSC only, or do we go beyond that? And we've argued at least 20 hours over the past year on how to do that, but the overwhelming tendency of ANS people is to restrict it to public health and safety as defined by NRC. But as Prasad says, there's no reason why you have to restrict it to that. The ANS doesn't have any rules that say we're only writing standards for the NRC. So by all means, and get your committee to expand the definition as you see fit.
Okay, yeah, I just thought I'd throw that in there. It's definitely going to come up.
Won't be the first time.
Yeah. All right.
Okay,
thanks.
Let's go on to the next slide. So, 226 also has guidance associated with it, and what I think 226 does well is that the requirements associated with accomplishing the outcome is at a level where there is a lot of flexibility given to the user of the standard. And it can take into account the range of regulatory requirements. But eventually, when it comes to actually implementing the requirements of 226, you have to go to the prescription that is in ANSI ASCE 4305. And this is where, the distinction, oops, I'm so sorry. Um,
I'm sure Prasad will be back in a moment.
Yeah,
I don't know.
sorry
Oh,
about that. I should have unplugged the phone. I thought Jim was going to do all the talking. I wasn't prepared for this. But, you know, I'd like to make sure that Bob Youngblood, who was also involved with 226, you know, he doesn't remember the details, but, you know, Bob, if you have anything to say about 226, you know, I'd like you to do that, please.
Well, you're right that it was a long time ago and my memory is flaky. And what I was just writing down is that if we're going to talk about it, we should show clips of it earlier in the slides, in case others like me don't have it memorized.
I mean, all you have to do is go back to one of our RP3C meetings where we did that, and you generated the slides for that, Bob. And so, you know, when you get down to preparing the next version of the training, you can you can use work that you've done already. So
excellent, thank you.
Okay, so I mean, in terms of communicating the idea of 2.26, you know, it uses frequencies and limit states as the sort of brackets into which you can put all the different components and structures, you know, in a nuclear power plant. And therefore give requirements that are more suited to the particular category that you're trying to accomplish. So next slide. So, I mean, here again, this is the kind of probing, I think, that that will help a working group, you know, do a better job of writing a standard. Is, you know, to think about the criteria, and you know, is it necessary that the criteria have to address a lot of detail, or can the criterion be put at a high enough level that there's flexibility for the user of the standard? This is the distinction between the what and the how. So, you know, again, we are not trying to offer all the answers. This is part of kind of probing and scrutiny that I think will enable ANS to produce better standards. This idea of, you know, what are risk insights? I mean, Han Fan is a member of, you know, the NRC staff, and he's a member of the senior member of the staff, you know. I mean, he himself was telling us earlier in this session how the staff has difficulty with risk insights. And yet, if you look at the PRA applications, you know, usually they're associated with risk insights. And so, you know, I think in terms of what is a good example in this regard is 226, because, you know, it clearly lays out the frequencies and the consequences in terms of the limit states of the various structures or systems. So next slide. So go ahead. Did somebody have? No, okay. So these are, you know, the analysis that Jim has gone through, and you know, the answers, and as he is sometimes inclined to, you know, it's not a clear answer. It is, you know, the ANS 226 is a higher level standard than that ASE 4305. And the combination of them accomplishes the outcome, and I think does so successfully, that, you know, ANS 226 is under revision right now, but the revision I don't expect is going to change it much. It may even broaden its application, you know, into other areas. So, next slide. To develop insights. Now, you know, this brings up an issue with 226 that is rather tricky. In terms of how the standard defines the consequences, it does not use the way that you know, NRC has generally applied scenarios to define the design basis. You know, where you take credit for the structures, such as whether it's the cladding or the reactor coolant pressure boundary or the containment. But you know, the 226 is based on unmitigated consequences. And you know, this becomes very tricky, and as I understand it, it's being applied in DOE in a way that you know, makes life very difficult to the contractors of DOE. At least that's what I've heard. But you know, again, this aspect of 226 serves as a lesson to you know, to look at a standard from the user's standpoint. And from the user standpoint, it's hard to tell, you know, for most of the kinds of scenarios that ANS standards apply to, what are unmitigated consequences, you know? So again, this is tricky. Let me ask, is anybody in the audience today familiar with 226? Because, you know, my familiarity in it is just as someone who participated in developing the standard, but I don't really know how it is applied in the field. Doesn't look like anybody has experience with it, but I've heard that it's used by DOE quite a bit. Next slide, Pat. So anyway, I think we've been through this, you know. Next slide. I guess that's the end of the presentation, is it, Pat?
Yeah, let's see. Yeah, this is the last slide.
Okay, I mean, we set aside 2 hours. We are an hour and 20 minutes into this. You know, what Jim wanted to accomplish, I think most of it he was able to do. At this point, we can open it up for discussion. What do you think about the training material presented? And, what should we take away in terms of if you have recommendations on what to remove from the training, or things that we got into too much detail on. Appreciate feedback on those types of questions. Anybody?
Hi, Prasad. This is Ronnie. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
So I agree with Jim and with Jim O'Brien and Jim August about the maintenance rule. I think it's a very elegant rule, and as an NRC inspector in the field, when the maintenance rule was implemented, what I found truly valuable about that rule were two things. One is it was developed in parallel with a license renewal rule, and the license renewal rule focuses on the passive long-lived safety system structures and components. And the maintenance rule, the second thing is, so the rules are complementary. They were developed in tandem, and they were developed to accomplish different things smartly. But the other thing that I really found added to the safety of nuclear power plant operations was the online risk monitoring function of the maintenance rule, which ensured that as the plant operators entered into maintenance evolutions or operational evolutions, they considered what was out of service and what was in service at the time, to make sure that they had sufficient defense in depth to conduct operations safely. And I was just wondering what the attendees of the training might think about emphasizing that feature of the maintenance rule and the nexus to the license renewal rule for a complete kind of RIPB approach to plant operations during the first 40 years, but also during the period of extended operation.
Okay, that's, I guess, available for others to comment. But in the meantime, Bob Kalantari has your hand up. Bob, would you like to?
Yes, please. I actually have a general comment, and I think we've been talking about it with the ANS Standard Board, but I also want to share it with this audience. What I see, obviously, is the issue we have that different organizations are developing standards and sometimes very similar standards. I think there has to be a very close coordination between different organizations before we take on the initiative of developing a standard or a code. That's not productive, I think. I mean, I heard today, for example, should ANS develop a standard for not for public safety, but for the plant? Okay, I mean, if there's a request like that, we should think about it and see if there are other organizations like OSHA that maybe already has, or they are the right organization to develop such a standard. And we kind of get them involved, have them lead those. Yesterday, 5 hours on the call with the, NRC, the risk informed performance based. That meeting, okay, we all know IEEE has a standard for categorization of electrical equipment, and they developed it, and it's out there, and nobody wants it. I don't know why they did it. I've been a member of IEEE for 45 years. I'm not involved with that. So my recommendation is, at least for our organization, which, we are probably the most relevant when it comes to nuclear standards, we pay close attention to which standards we are developing and see what else is out there, get input from them. I mean, I just listed, we have IEEE, ASME, ANS, NEI, NRC, EPRI, IAEA, and I probably forgot half a dozen others. So I think at this point, again, what I want to say is we need to pay closer attention, which organization should lead it, and before we jump in there. And I know for the record that this committee, the ANS, has developed some standards that at the end, people are saying, gee, we don't want it. So why did we put the effort now that we don't want it? So that's more a general comment for consideration. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other recommendations or comments or lessons that people would like to ask us to take away in terms of improving the training?
Hey, Prasad, this is Jim August. I got a comment on what we just said there. As someone who's initiated standards and developed standards, it's sometimes difficult to predict the future and the degree to which industry or others will be interested in using a standard. And a lot of that depends on, frankly, government funding and DOE funding of new projects and so forth. So when we do write the pens up and propose a new standard, we try to guess what future value that will have and what interest there will be. But I'll tell you what, to me, it's just purely a toss-up. It's almost impossible to predict the future. So that's my 2 cents on that.
Thank you. Okay, let's see. I think, at this point, we have accomplished what we wanted to with this first training exercise. I'd really like for everybody to give us some feedback by email. If you can put some thoughts together, that'll help us improve the preparation of the training. For the most important audience for us, I think, are the chairs of the working groups. And we have many working groups that have said that they want to use RIPB methods. And, so I'd like to ask if you put yourself in the position of a working group chair, what was useful about the training today, and what can be improved. So with that, I think that's all I wanted to say. Todd, you have your hand up. I'm sorry, I didn't see it.
No, that's all right, Prasad. I just put it up the end. I apologize. I missed the first majority of the course. But is it clear up front, just based on the last little discussion, is it clear up front in the training that this RIPB document is intended to be the tool for the working group chairs and the consensus committees in evaluating and writing a standard, and not necessarily in evaluating what the standard, I mean, we need to understand what the standard is going to be used for, but not its effectiveness and applicability. But is it really clear up front so we don't get the question on, well, this is not intended to be a standard that's endorsed by an industry of some sort?
I mean, to me, that's an open question. I mean, we prepared the training, to help working groups make some decisions about using the concepts and methods, that are considered risk-informed performance-based. Because if they didn't use RIPB methods, they would be just doing standards the conventional way, which are generally characterized as using deterministic and prescriptive approaches, So, I mean, the two questions are, do you actually need a standard? And, how would you like to construct the standard,
Well, Prasad, this is Jim. Let me clarify what I thought was asked. What I thought the question really got to was, is this guidance specifically internal to ANS or for our internal purposes, writing other standards, or is it intended to become a standard that we present to the world? And my understanding was it was purely an ANS tool to help us write better RIPB standards within ANS.
Agreed.
Yes. I mean, Todd, I'm sorry if I misunderstood your question. Apologize, but what Jim said is consistent with what I believe we are trying to accomplish.
Yeah, and my question was more, do we make that clear up front in the training, since I missed the beginning of the training?
Ah, okay. Okay, I mean, I guess to some extent, we alluded to that when we spent a lot of time talking about outcomes, and that the working group be very clear on, you know, defining what is the outcome. In fact, this is one of the first slides. Pat has been good enough. So the clear statement of ultimate outcomes called for in a standard is a critical step. So does that respond to your question?
Well, I agree with the content of the slide, but as the attendee and the user of the guidance document, is it clear in this training that that guidance document is to help in writing the standards? It's not a standard itself. That's all.
Oh, okay. Yeah, and the answer to your question is clearly yes. It is not a standard. We don't have any shall statements within the guidance document. You know, if you see shall statements, they're quotations from elsewhere, and also to make the association with requirements which are considered essential elements of developing a standard. So. Okay. Any other comments? Otherwise, I would say we can, I'd like to thank everybody for participating and you know, helping us in this you know, in this part of the RP3C activity. So we'll be in touch. You know, I'll be talking about this at the RP3C meeting at our November you know, the committee meeting itself, and also addressing the standards board on what we've learned from this training session. Bob Youngblood, do you have anything else to say?
No, I'm, the questions that have occurred to me are sort of theological, and I'll promote sidebars with people, but I thought Jim did a terrific job on the material, and I think I have some thoughts on how to do the examples more in a way more conducive to the user community that we hope to expose them to. But you know, Todd, if you don't know where the guidance document is on the RP3C site, I'll shoot it to you. But it's there in headlights to be downloaded.
Oh yeah, I'm real familiar with it.
Oh,
I
okay.
was just wanting to make sure that our training clearly showed it was to be this is a tool and not a standard. That's all.
Okay.
Yeah, that's right.
In fact, I had conversations with Prasad with ANS 314 a couple of times, because it was one of the documents that went through RP3C prior to the draft guidance document going out.
Yeah, and you know, all those discussions have contributed to where we are now. It doesn't mean that this is, you know, where we should be, but hopefully we will work towards that. So, okay. Okay, Pat, again, thank you very much for your help in this. And if there's nothing else, I'd like to call this session of the training session to a conclusion. Is that
Thank
okay,
you.
Pat?
Yes, and I do want to thank you for stepping in at the last minute, Prasad. I know it was a surprise. You did a great job. And Bob, thank you for helping. And, as you say, Jim O'Brien really has done a lot of work on this. So, he's not here right now, but I do thank him as well. So I will go ahead and end this. If anyone has any questions that they didn't get answered, they think of later, you want a copy of the presentation, just please contact me, P. Schroeder at ans.org. And I will probably have the recording and the slides up on RP3C's public website later this afternoon, if not tomorrow morning. So thank you very much.
Thank you all. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
So